We're going to work on decimals. We'll review the little bit that we did last week and then practice some more with that. So you will need these two papers to start with. They're blank on the back, so we may use them to write. I'm just going to remind you a little bit of what we went over with place value. So remember with decimals that anything in the decimal place value is less than 1. So it's like taking a fraction of something. So it looks just like this. We know that our regular place value starts with ones, tens, and then keeps going hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, all the way that way. We can go the other way too. We have this decimal, and that we use, some people say point, but we can also say and. It's the only time when we're reading a number we can say and, because we're saying we have a whole number and part of 1. Anything over here is less than 1. It doesn't give you a full 1 yet. Okay, so we start with the tenths and then the hundredths. When we're reading them, we read the number the way we see it. So 3 and then whatever's here. You read the number as it is, and you use the word of the place value that it ends in. So this is 3 and 47 hundredths. If, let's say there was no 7 there, this would be 3 and 4 tenths. All right, so I'm going to write both of these on here. And just really quickly, we're going to go over them. Now, if you were at school on Friday, the back side of this page already has a place value chart on it that you've written. Anything that you want to add to that, you can. So if you want to do this with me, you can. Okay, this is a decimal, but it's a different way of writing a mixed fraction. So how many whole do I have? Let's just say I have 3. We'll use money. That's what we'll use. That may be the easiest way to understand it. If I have $3.47, how many whole dollars do I have? 3. So I would write 3. If I was going to draw it out, I'd have 3 $1 bills. And then what else do I have? I have 47 what, if this is money? Cents. And how many cents make a whole dollar? 100. So I have 3 and I have 47 cents out of 100. 3 and 47 hundredths. 3 and 47 hundredths. Okay, so that means I could have a quarter, a dime, another dime, and 2 pennies. Okay, 3 and 47 hundredths. Now, all decimals are not money, but that may be the easiest way for you to start thinking of them, to really understand what it is that we're doing here. We're taking this out of 100, so whatever it is that you're looking at. Let's just say candy bars. I'll do it down here. Well, right here. If these are, if I take the dollar sign off, this is 1 candy bar, 2 candy bars, 3 candy bars. It's saying in the 4th candy bar, I've split it. I'm not going to split it right now, but I split it into 100 pieces. How many of the pieces of the candy bar do I have? 47. That's what decimals are. They're just saying you have something that's not quite 1 yet. Okay? So if we're looking at, I'm going to erase that part. If we're looking at 3 and 4 tenths, and I'm writing that as a fraction, how many whole do I have? I have 3, and then I have 4 out of 10. I have 3 and 4 tenths. Okay, so this would be like having, I shouldn't have erased everything, $3. And then what coin is worth 10? A dime. I have 4 dimes. Okay. Now we know that 4 dimes is 10, 20, 30, 40 cents. That's 40 out of 100. I could put that on there. it's also the same if I leave it off and say I have 4 tens. 4 10-cent coins, those are 4 tens, is 40 cents. They equal the same thing. All right. So let's practice just a few more, writing as a fraction and a decimal. So I want you to use the back side. You already have a place value chart written on this page if you were here on Friday. If you're out of room, then draw one on the back of this page. All right. If you are not here, take just a second, look at somebody else's and see how they drew theirs. You do not need to add in everything they have. That doesn't matter. Okay, so you may not have the tens. I think we just did ones on that place value chart. If you do, mine no longer does. I just took it off. It doesn't matter. Okay, and then over to the side, we're writing fraction. If you need to pause to get those papers and get them ready, then do that. I'm going to start with a decimal. I'm going to write the decimal. You write it down. I want you to read it out loud, and then I want you to write the fraction. All right, we'll be using mixed numbers. That means you're going to have a whole number and a fraction. Read this fraction or this decimal out loud. 1 79/100. Now write the fraction. How many whole do you have? And then you know anything after that decimal, that becomes your numerator. And whatever place value it ends in, that is the denominator. So if it ends in the tenths, then 10 is your denominator. If it ends in the hundredth, 100 is your denominator. When you get into further place values, you won't do that till probably 5th grade. But the next one is thousandths. So if it ended in the thousandths, that would be your denominator. So this should be your denominator, 1 79/100, right? Do you notice that when you write it and you read it as a fraction, it really is the same as reading it as a decimal. 1 79/100, 1 79/100. Okay, 2 more. Let's do this one. Read this out loud while you write it down. 7 9/10. Now write it as a fraction. Read that. 7 9/10. Right there. It's the exact same thing. Okay? Do you see how the mixed numbers and the decimals really are the same? Okay, one more. Let's try. Read that. 2 6/100. You read it as the number it is. If I saw that number, I would know. Like the only time that we really see a 0 by accident in front of just a 1-digit number is when you're subtracting. And sometimes like you subtract something and you have the 0 and you go, oh, I don't need it there. Well, we do need it here because it's holding that place value. We can't have a number that looks like this. Right? So it's 2 6/100. Quickly write that fraction down. Read that. 2 6/100. Very good. If you have specific questions, I want you to pause the video and do that. Otherwise, we're going to move to, I'll write the fraction, you read the fraction, and write it into your place value chart as a decimal. Okay. Write this one down and read it. 4 3/10. Write that down in the decimal form. It should look just like this. 4 3/10. Good. All right. Try this one. Sorry, it's changing it. Read this. 9 3/100. Write that down. Be very careful how you write it. Remember that what you have in that numerator needs to fit into the place value chart, but it needs to go as far as your denominator is. This is where people get tricked up a little bit. 9, oops, I didn't write a decimal. 9 and 3/100. If you put it here, it would be 9 and 3/10. So make sure that you have it in there correctly. Okay, last one. Read this one out loud. 6 and 42/100. Write it into your decimals, into your place value. 6 and 42/100. Good. All right, let's try the front side of this page. Okay, this one looks different than what we've done. All they're doing is using decimals in a different way. All right, so because we have to go through this so quickly, that means we only have a few days to really get through decimals. We're not going to be able to do everything. So what we are going to do this week, we're going to work on the decimals today. You're going to be comparing them and working with that, and then you're going to learn to add and subtract them, also using them as money. I think once you see them as money, it will become pretty easy. Okay, so what that means is you're just going to be you're going to have to be really focused on everything we do. Make sure if you have questions, you're asking them, because we're really going to go through it quickly. Next week, we'll do we'll do a whole different concept, and then we'll really be done with it. But there'll be a lot of time to work on both decimals and what we would do next week. So you need to get the instruction this week and make sure that you know what you're doing. Ask questions as you have them. All right, so look at number 1. It says shade the first 7 units of the tape diagram. Count by tenths to label the number line using a fraction and a decimal for each point. Circle the decimal that represents the shaded part. So first thing we need to do, those are a lot of words. First thing you need to do is count them. If this is 0 and this is 1, okay, that means each part of this is a fraction of 1. Count how many you have here. 1, 2, 10. There's 10 of them. So each one is 1/10. Okay, so we're going to start on the top. It says shade in the first 7 units. So just quickly do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Know where 7s are, and then just shade it in. Okay, I just did it like that. Now each one of these is a fraction. So this one is, you'll have to look on yours. I don't know why this gets like that. I think it knows I want you to see something, so then it gets a little bit fuzzy. Each one of these is 1/10. So if this is 1/10, this is 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. You're going to write the fraction on the bottom. I want you to pause the video quickly, do that, and then check with mine. It really should take you about 30 seconds. Okay, you should have that written down. What I want you to see, you already know how to do this part. We've done this with fractions easily. I want you to see the 1. That's 10/10. Okay? So it still is, when the numerator and denominator have the same number, it is still 1 whole. I want you to remember that. Okay? So now as we go, we still have 0. That's our whole number. These are all tenths. So this is 1/10, 2/10. Same way you read the fraction, but now you're going to write it as a decimal. Okay, so put the 0 to show we have no whole numbers. This is 1/10, 2/10. I don't have to read the 0 because I know there's nothing there. 3/10, 4/10. Okay, I want you to go all the way across to right here. Very quickly do that. Again, about 30 seconds, and then check back. All right, so it should look like that all the way across. What I want you to see as you're going is, these are just like the fractions, okay? So this is 5/10 in a decimal, 5/10 in a fraction. How many does 5/10 the fraction need to get up to 1 whole? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. because 10 minus 5 is 5. It's the same here. Count how many decimals, how many tenths. 5 tenths needs to get up to 1 whole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's still the same. It just turns into 1 whole. All right, after we have 9 tenths here, this turns into, in the tenths, you could put 0.0 after the 1. There's nothing in the tenths. It's like it's being carried over to the whole number. Okay, so I'm just going to show you that really quickly. If I was adding these, not just counting, I might put the whole number in there. So whenever I add, don't worry about this part. We're going to do it later this week. I just want you to see it, and hopefully it'll be a little bit easier once you see it. 9 tenths plus 1 tenth. 9 plus 1 is 10. But we know that only one digit can go in each place value. So just like regular adding, I have to carry. Well, now 1 plus 0 is 1. Okay, now I have 1 whole. It moved out of the tenths place and moved over. So 9 tenths, just like a fraction, 9 tenths plus 1 more tenth is 1 whole. Okay, so very quickly, that's not something like, oh, you have to know it. I said it once, you have to know it. I'm going to show you throughout this week. And then when we get to adding, hopefully your brain will go, oh, I've already heard that. I know that. Okay, so circle the decimal that represents the shaded part. How many did they tell you to shade? 7. 7 tenths. Circle that decimal. All right, let's look at the next one. Number 2, it says write the total amount of water in fraction form and decimal form. Shade the last bottle to show the correct amount. So right here, look at where their line is. Okay, read this decimal. 5 tenths. So you can count these to verify, but because it's telling you, you see the decimal 5 tenths, you know that this is broken into tens. So if this one is 5 tenths, where this line is 6 tenths. Write that as a fraction and as a decimal. You see the decimal, so you know it's just one more than that, and then write it as a fraction as you hear it. 6 tenths. What's in the numerator? 6. What's in the denominator? 10. Good. Try to do this next one on your own. Remember, as you read it, it's 5 tenths is what they show you. So each one of those lines or dashes is a tenth. Let's check it and see if we have the same thing. What did you count it up to? Should be at 8 tenths. 8 over 10 or 8 tenths. 8 tenths. Okay, now this one, they gave it to you. They're telling you that they want it to be 9 tenths. Write that fraction. Should be numerator 9 and denominator 10. Count up to the 9 tenths or count down. Because you know, 10 tenths would be at the top. So 9 tenths would be one less than that. All right, let's look at that bottom there. It says write the total weight of the food on each scale in fraction form or decimal form. So they're giving you one, you're going to write the other. So the broccoli and lettuce, read that weight. What does it say? Read it on your paper. 4 tenths of a kilogram. Write that as a fraction. Same way you read it, 4 tenths. It's 4 over 10. Okay, next one, they tell you it's 8 tenths of a kilogram. Write it here as a decimal. How many whole does it have? 0. That's 0.8. Good. Read this one. This one you've got to, you've got to read it. So we're going to have to write it both as a fraction and a decimal. So the only one that they gave you 2 benchmarks. They gave you 0 and they gave you 5 tenths. So you know each one of these little dashes is 1 tenth. Where is it at? 2/10. Write that up right next to it and put the label on it. How much does it weigh? 2/10 of a kilogram. Write that as the fraction. All right, hopefully this is starting to be pretty simple for you, seeing how to do that, okay? So what I want you to do right now is get the other page quickly, okay? We're just going to look through some of those together. We're going to do some of it. Some of it may not make total sense. It might not come as simple as that first page did, but it's going to help as we go through the rest of the week. All right, so it says write the length of the bug in centimeters. I want you to take just a second and count between the 0 and the 1. How many dashes are there? 10. Okay, so if I'm measuring, I just can draw a line at really where the object ends, and I can see it goes here. Now, a trick for knowing this on the ruler is you have longer lines for your whole number measurements, 0 and 1. Halfway through is another longer line. It's not as long, but it's longer than these other dashes. So this is going to be our 5/10. So fraction form, how do we write that? Say it out loud. 5/10. Decimal form, 0.5. 5/10 of a centimeter, 5/10 of a centimeter. How far does the bug need to walk before its nose is at the 1 centimeter mark? How much further does it need? Count those little dashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It needs to go how much of a centimeter? 5 what? Tenths. Write it down either way you want. Fraction or decimal. It needs to go 5/10 more because 5/10, where it's at, plus 5/10 equals 1 whole. Good. All right. So what we're going to do right now, it says fill in the blank to make the sentence true in both fraction form and decimal form. So they're just saying, hey, we want to make 1 whole. What do we have to add to it? Okay. So just think of what you know. 1 centimeter. We're right here with the fractions. Okay. We're working with what denominator? They broke them up in tenths. So 1 whole centimeter is what fraction? 10/10. If you need to, write that next to those, next to A, B, and C by the 1 centimeter. It's 10/10. Okay? So on letter A, if you already have 8/10 of a centimeter, how many do you need to get to 10/10? They have the same denominator, so just check the numerators. 8 plus what is 10? 2. You need to add 2/10 of a centimeter to get to 1 whole centimeter. All right, are you seeing that? If not, I want you to stop and ask a question quickly. Pause the video and do that. I want you to do letter B and C on your own very quickly and then check back with the video. All right, B should have been fairly simple for you because we just did 8/10 plus 2/10 equals 1 whole centimeter. Because 8/10 plus 2/10 is 10/10. Same numerator and denominator equals 1. Well, here they said 2/10. What do you have to add? 8/10, right? They just switched those. All right, what about on the bottom? 6/10 plus 4/10. 6 plus 4 is 10. The denominator stayed the same. That's what equaled 1. All right, with the decimal form, it's the exact same thing. We know that what they give you right here in the decimal is a tenth, 8/10, 2/10, 6/10. Well, how many more tenths does it need to equal up to 1 whole, up to 10/10? Okay, it's going to be the same thing. So say them out loud. 8/10. How many does it need to get to 10/10, to 1 whole? It needs 2/10. Write that as the correct decimal. And then 2/10 needs 8/10 to get to 1 whole. And 6/10 needs 4/10 to get to 1 whole. If you have questions about that, I want you to pause. I want you to ask them, because now's your time to ask. This is kind of the building block part of it, where if you understand this part, you're going to be able to keep going on, and the rest should be fairly simple. Like, you might make some mistakes in there, or you might need something re-explained a little bit, but it should be fairly simple. All right, so part 6, I want you to try, we'll look at the one they did, and then I want you to try these on your own. They are showing you the word form, 3/10. Well, what's a fraction that matches 3/10? Right there. And then how do you write that as a decimal? 3/10. So I want you to pause the video, and I want you to read it to yourself, and then find the fraction and the decimal that matches what you're reading. Then check back with the video. All right, let's check these. The second one there, read it out loud. 5/10. So find the fraction that shows you 5/10, and then the decimal, 5/10. Okay, follow where my pen is going, not necessarily where my lines went. 6/10. Find the fraction, 6/10. Find the decimal, 6/10. Okay, and then the next one, 9/10. Fraction 9/10, and decimal 9/10. The last one, read it out loud. 2/10, fraction 2/10, decimal 2/10. All right, so what you're going to be doing is first asking any questions you have. You need to ask a lot of questions, all right? Make sure you're understanding how to do that, how to read them, how to write it as a fraction or a decimal whenever you're given the opposite one. Okay, what you're going to work on is a quick check. It just has some as fractions and you write it as a decimal, some as decimals and you write it as a fraction. So practice those and then get that checked right away quickly. That's why it's called a quick check, so you can see where you're at. Are you understanding it? The back side has word problems. They're not necessarily about decimals. I really want you working on those word problems. Remember to use cubes. I'll write it down, and then if you want to leave it on the board or you want to write it on your paper, you could do that. Use cubes. You're going to circle the numbers you see. You're going to underline the question, box in the keywords. Try to figure out, do they want me to add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Make your equation and solve it. Okay, so you're going to work on those, and then as time remains, you're going to work on whatever part of math is most difficult for you. I'm going to say it and then I'll put it back up if you want to pause the video there. You're going to work on what you think you need the most practice in, whether it be with fractions, place value, adding and subtracting, with regrouping, multiplying. Like, do you need some practice just with your multiplication facts? Do you need to practice double digit multiplication? Do you need to practice long division? All of those things. This week we're really going to be practicing on all of those. So you're going to practice what we have for the video and the assignment, and then you're going to practice with the parts that are most difficult for you. So you need to be thinking about that. Where do you need the most help? And if you have questions, you definitely need to be asking those. All right, so work on your page and your word problems with those, and then keep being awesome and growing in the parts you still need help with.